With the pandemic raging and a vaccine on the horizon, today on Face to Face, we're going to talk about vaccines and Judaism. Hello and welcome to Face to Face. My name is Rabbi David Paskin, and I'm joined today, as always, by Rabbi Alan Litwak. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Rabbi David. Nice to do this once again. Really excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, we had some good feedback. People seemed to enjoy our conversation last time, so this should be nice. When the last time we were together, we just came off Thanksgiving. Now we've got Hanukkah on the horizon. Any fun plans for Hanukkah?
Every night we've got fun plans at Temple Sinai. We're going to be doing some really nice, quick with the congregation, 15 minutes of lighting candles, tell some stories, teach some stuff, and of course sing songs. And then we're off to play dreidel and eat lots of latkes.
That's the only thing that matters to me is the latkes.
There it is.
That and challah, those are my two weaknesses. I can be really good around pretty much any kind of food except for latkes and challah for some reason.
Yeah.
Neither
of which are the best for you, but
no, they're terrible for you. And you saw when I was in your office the other day, I'm logging everything that I eat now, so I'm terrified of having to log all of the latkes that I put.
All the latkes.
Right, exactly. There are more and worse things than latkes and challah, though, that we have to be worried about these days. And of course, we've been facing as a country, as a world, this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's touched everybody in a unique way. For me, my entire family had it this summer, and while it was terrible, in some strange ways, I'm glad that I got it and sort of got it out of the way. But having said that, it's this is such a tremendously difficult time for our world, and yet here we are with hope on the horizon that there might be a vaccine. And so what I was hoping we could talk about today is sort of your views and Jewish views on vaccination, and what is our obligation to heal and to protect within Jewish law. And if I may, Rabbi, I wanted to just start by sharing a couple of facts that I found online. There was a 2019 study, this is from Infection Control Today, and it surveyed more than 2,000 U.S. adults. And the poll was actually done by the Harris poll. And 2 in 5, that's 45% of those people who were questioned, said that there is something that has caused them to doubt vaccine safety. And as I was preparing for today, one of the things that I learned, I knew, but I was reminded of, is that the question of whether or not we should get, people are required to get vaccinated is not a new question. This is something that's, it's been around for years, and that in fact, there are gradations, I think, of those people who are uncomfortable with the idea of vaccination, from anti-vaxxers to people who just have very legitimate, perhaps, concerns and questions.
Right. Look, all 50 states in the United States have compulsory vaccination laws when it comes to students. Okay, but that seems like okay, so everybody's on board. But the truth is that reflecting the diversity of faith traditions in our country, and the fact that there are some faith traditions that reject the practice of vaccination, 45 out of our 50 states offer religious exemptions. So the question for us, is if faith tradition should play a role in this conversation, what is it that Judaism has to say about it? And then I think we can get to the question of whether this particularly COVID has been politicized to the point that there's questions about efficacy of the vaccine, whether it's coming out too quickly or anything like that. So
correct me if I'm wrong, but and I don't have this data with me, but the reform movement as a whole has put out, long before COVID, I guess it's a responsa or a
responsa. Mm-hmm.
About and it does it address specifically the question of religious exemptions?
Yeah. So you know what, I want to hold on to that. I think we should go back. I think because the reform movement's response, which comes 1999, so it's well over 20 years old, but that's based on a much earlier tradition. I think we first need to understand the Torah's take on the importance of life and guarding your health in general. So we know, right, that throughout Jewish history, one of the most sacred commandments has been pikuach nefesh, saving a life. That the idea of the preservation of life takes precedence over almost all Jewish laws. Right? I love when I can sort of trick my teenage students, all right, and I say, you know, which is more important, and they usually choose Yom Kippur, as if Yom Kippur is the most sacred of Jewish holidays, and the truth is that we could break Yom Kippur like that, right? When it comes to our health, okay? There's even out of, not just out of the Torah, but later in the Talmud, right? Again, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, the Talmud teaches that one who saves a life, it's counted as if that person has saved an entire world. So the idea of life being so important, and the saving of life being such an incredible mitzvah, has been throughout Jewish tradition, throughout Jewish history. All we need to do is go 1,000 years, and probably the most well-known doctor of Jewish history, right? Also a rabbi, scholar, biblical commentator, Talmudic commentator, Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, better known as Maimonides, from the 12th century, says God created drugs and compounds and gave us, humanity, the intelligence necessary to discover their medicinal purposes and properties, right? So therefore, we must use them in warding off illness and disease. So the notion of us using medicine to ward off disease, to protect our health, has been around for centuries, even millennia.
And you know that one of the things that stands out to me about that obligation, as it were, was put really profoundly just this week. Actually, I saw it in the New York Post, an article by Rabbi Avi Weiss from Riverdale, and he frames the conversation about our responsibilities vis-a-vis caring for ourselves as not really about ourselves, particularly when it comes to vaccines. That his argument, he says, I'll share a quote, he says, "At the foundation of our commandments is assuming responsibilities from which rights flow. The gateway to giving to self is giving to others. This is an important lesson to realize," Rabbi Weiss writes, "because when a vaccine is approved and distributed en masse, we ought to do the best we can to act responsibly, step back, make room for others, and take our place in line to gratefully get inoculated." So his argument is that, yes, vaccines will protect me, but that's not why I get a vaccine. I get a vaccine as perhaps as a Jew because of my responsibility, as you said, to protect others.
That's right. That is, I think, look, guarding our health is doesn't only make sense. All right. I mean, it is a mitzvah. All right. And it is not only a mitzvah that we are guarding our own health, all right, but that we have that greater responsibility. And that's where I think that the reform movement has come in so clearly that in 1999 they had a responsum, which is a religious answer to a question, like a response, a responsum on compulsory immunizations. And they said in that responsum, based on Jewish tradition, that vaccines qualify as refuah beduka, a proven remedy, and are therefore an obligation. The responsum states that Jewish tradition would define immunization as part of the mitzvah of healing and recognize it as a required measure, right? Since we're not entitled, right, because our bodies are not our own, our bodies belong to God, okay, that we're not entitled to endanger ourselves or our children for whom we are responsible by refusing proven medical treatment. Right? And the responsum goes on, right, to endorse programs of compulsory immunization for our communities, with, of course, exemptions granted for those individuals whose medical conditions place them at a particularly high risk of injury or side effects. But aside from those individual cases, there are no valid Jewish religious grounds to support the refusal to immunize as a general principle.
And I think this becomes even more important when we look at the science just around this one vaccine, or not this one vaccine, but COVID-19 vaccines that, according to the University of Miami, they actually just put this out today. They argue that experts estimate that between 50 to 70% of the population must get inoculated to stop the spread. And so,
yeah, I read that. Mm-hmm.
So this idea that again, that it's not just about me, that getting inoculated, getting this vaccine is part of my responsibility to my fellow person. I do want to just throw out there, because I want us to have a little bit of a debate, and it sounds like we're in agreement on this, that I was just hearing yesterday about the I guess it was people who were in the vaccine trials talking about some of the side effects, and that some of them were pretty nasty. So I'm not sure that, again, I don't think it's necessarily a simple everyone has to get it or everyone should get it, because I think some people will have very valid worries and concerns.
And we actually don't disagree on that. I think one of the challenges that we've had is we want a vaccine. We want a vaccine tomorrow, right? But any responsible scientist is going to say, look, we've got to go through a series of trials, right? And we're going to find things that are right, and that will advance us forward. And there are going to be things that we're going to discover that are wrong, and that'll hold us back, right? And ideally, right, on the first try, right, you're going to get everything right. But we know that that isn't the case. So at what point, right, does the balance tip to say we've gotten enough things right that we're going to recognize that no vaccine is perfect, that there are going to be side effects for a small percentage, okay? And this is where I'm a rabbi and I'm not a doctor, okay? But that though that percentage of people who it might affect adversely is going to be so low that we don't have to, that the positives outweigh the negatives.
And so now this brings us to the conversation or the debate, I think, about truth telling, and who do we believe and what can we believe? Because while there are the scientists seem united on the efficacy of these particular vaccines, and yet there are so many people who have lost faith, who've lost trust. And this is, of course, I think, part of a much larger challenge that we're facing as a nation, this loss of trust. But the studies about those who don't want to take vaccines argue that the primary reason why people are anti-vaccination is not having to do anything with the vaccination. It has everything to do with their trust in the state.
Right. And look, what has been so disappointing throughout this entire pandemic is that this disease, and now, truthfully, the vaccine, has become politicized. Right? That isn't helpful, and it's not only it's not only political because the president sowed some of that distrust, right, or rejected some of the science. I think we need strong leadership when it comes to ensuring that confidence, and that means we need to. I read a different study that said, thankfully, I'm glad that public health officials still play a greater role than politicians in confidence building around the vaccine. The problem is that we need both. Okay? We need politicians who are bold enough to make some drastic measures, right, to ensure that there is mass distribution. Right? And I'm going to throw out another thing that it may be a whole different conversation, but I think that vaccines this has become political, not just because, all right, there is COVID, there's no COVID, we don't believe in the scientists, or we do believe in the scientists, but it's become political because of the potential inequality in distribution, right? That who is going to receive, and I'm glad that at least what seems to be happening is that we've got our first responders who need it first, okay? And then we have those who are the most vulnerable, which would be our elderly, or those who are sick. And then, all right, the rest of us, thankfully, I consider myself in that, who are younger and more healthy, and therefore can afford to wait. Right? But if we come back to that first issue of the politicization, I actually think that we all have a responsibility to participate in the dialogue around this. I think that people would say, Rabbi, you're not a doctor. You don't know if this vaccine works or not. And I don't profess to know that. Right? What I do profess to know is Jewish tradition. And that if I'm going to trust in the doctors, right, then once the doctors say to me, this is okay, then I'm going to put in my Jewish, rabbinic, religious stamp of approval, right, and encourage my congregation to get vaccinated.
I think that what you just said about, and you've said it a couple times actually, when scientists and doctors unite around the idea that it's safe and efficacious, I actually think that that's going to be more challenging than we think. And here's why. A dear friend of I believe ours, I think you know him too, Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, who is just one of the most amazing rabbis I know, posted something very challenging on Facebook the other day. And I'll share what he posted in a moment. But in the second line of his post, it was about getting vaccinated. In the second line of his post, he says, once scientific experts unite on it being safe and effective. It's in the second line of, say, a 30-line post. And half of the comments are all like, well, I'm not doing anything unless the scientists and medical experts say that it's safe. So, we can say that, but I still think that there's a barrier. There's something that is, despite being shown proof, despite us saying things over and over again, despite everyone's best intentions, there's still this fear. And my next question for you is, in a very practical way, what are we going to do about that once the vaccine is out, right? So Rabbi Yanklowitz's post was essentially, I won't read the whole thing, it was essentially a question. Should we bar entry to Jewish communal spaces to those who willfully and ideologically refuse to take a COVID-19 vaccine that's available to them once it's deemed safe by everyone, right? So in a practical way, what does it mean, both the obligation and our respect of those who may have questions or concerns or worries? How do we deal with that as a temple and as a Jewish community?
Right. Yeah. It was something that I hadn't, as I was preparing for this conversation, I realized, wait, we've got to have this conversation. We have, Temple Sinai has a COVID task force that we started when we were trying to figure out, do we need to close down things, and what does that mean? And then we started to talk about, well, how do we open up safely within the COVID world? But I think the third part of the conversation, which we haven't had, is what is going to be our policy. As Rabbi Yanklowitz said, you run a decent-sized early childhood center, and we have requirements, right, for vaccination. It's part of your registration, right? Is COVID going to be something that we are going to add to the list? And my guess is, I want to be clear online. I'm only speaking for myself. This has not yet reached.
We're not making policy here. Yeah,
we're not making policy here, but I think that the answer is going to be yes. I think we're going to, at a certain point, we're going to hit the that tipping point and say we're going to require it. It may be.
And by the way, even though we're not making policy, just to further clarify, even in our current vaccine policy, there are medical exceptions. We
right.
accept. So and the same, I'm sure, would apply to any vaccine. Right. But we're talking about ideological. Yeah.
Well, I think here's where it gets interesting. Right? Is that we can say that to our early childhood education students and families, but what does it mean for the person who's coming off of the street and wants to join us for Shabbat services, right?
Right.
And is there, as I know Britain is issuing identification cards that says you've been vaccinated. So is that going to
Really?
be, yeah, sure. Is that going to be the
Wow.
ticket that gains you entrance, or I'm sorry, you haven't been vaccinated yet, therefore you can't come in? And we haven't dealt
I
with that.
I didn't. That's amazing. I didn't know that
Well, I think
about
there's got to
Britain.
be some
Wow.
way of tracking how are they going to, other than just sheer numbers, how are they going to ensure that we get to that point of what they call herd immunity, which is you need, as you said, 70% of the population, and don't quote me on the number, but a certain high enough percentage that says we're now at a point where if somebody gets it, the rate of infection of others is going to be so low that we'll be able to
Right.
survive long
Right.
term.
And,
So,
and we're having this discussion because a vaccine is on the, please God, is on the horizon. I think
I
it
think so.
always bears worth repeating over and over and over again that until we get the vaccine, and perhaps even after we get the vaccine for some time, we have to continue to stay safe. We have to continue to wear masks. We have to continue to social distance. We have to
Of
continue
course.
to not gather. All those things are. It's easy to see the light at the end of the tunnel and become
Right.
lax.
And become lax. And I would also add to that that, like, two rabbis talking about this and what Jewish tradition says is an interesting conversation. But this is one of those where we say, speak to your medical provider and seek their advice. And the fact is that our COVID task force is led and part of and the number of people who are on that who are medical doctors who we seek their advice. We want them to and I won't give it away, but I in the last week I've had conversations about, okay, should we be encouraging a vaccine,
Yeah. You know,
taking the vaccine?
and of course we do leave it to our medical professionals. I have see if I can find them. Here they are. I have these are kind of gimmicky gifts that I give away. These are my Jewish 3D glasses. When you put
Nice.
them on, every bright light that you look at turns into Jewish stars.
Right.
And I call them my Jewish glasses. And the reason I bring them out is because one of the things that I talk to kids about is how we Jews, we love to look at the world through Jewish glasses. And so, yes, vaccines, this whole discussion is in the realm of the medical, but because we look at it through the lens, through our Jewish glasses, through our Jewish lenses, we learn that the medical efficacy, the safety is the most important. And at the same time, it is also important to remember that as Jews, we bear responsibility to our own health, to the health of others, to the health of our communities. And so for all those people that are going to get frustrated when the vaccine is out and synagogues or Jewish community centers or whatever begin to have policies that say, perhaps, you need to be vaccinated to come on site, that's not, that is not an effort to break
Not
down.
personal.
Right. It's not personal. It's not an effort to break down all the wonderful kiruv, all the wonderful outreach work that we've done. It's precisely because it is a Jewish value to care for one another. And getting
Yeah.
this vaccine is a big piece of that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rabbi, thank you again so much for this conversation. I feel like we're sort of touching just the tip of all of these, but they're important conversations to begin. And if nothing else, I hope that people will perhaps hear what you have to say, and then continue the conversation. Talk with your family members, talk with your friends, share your ideas, listen to one another, and we'll all be better. We learn best. What's the Pirkei Avot, right? I learn the most from my students. So let everyone be your student, and let everyone be your teacher, and let's all learn from one another in these conversations. Friends, I hope that you will like our Facebook page at what are we? Temple Sinai ND, is that our thing? Facebook? Yeah, Temple Sinai ND. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, visit our website, join us for services. We'd love to see you here. And hopefully we'll see you again very, very soon on another episode.
In person.
In person. And until we can be in person and vaccinated, we hope to see you again very soon on another episode of Face to Face by Rabbi Litwak.